All right.
So, being that the shoulder feels a little funky, let's start with the shoulder car.
Okay.
Yeah?
So,
Yep, irradiating at about 20 to 30%.
Still having trouble with the irradiation, but let's see. Okay, I don't know if I'm gonna go out here just so that I'm
wherever you
actually
think you're-
sure I'm in my camera view here. All right, so. It was a struggle to get my daily cars in this week, but I did it.
Good stuff. Okay, for the next few, I'm going to grab onto your rib cage, and I'm going to be your personal block here.
Okay.
Go for it. Nice one. One more.
That's funny, I can feel how much I've been using my ribs to move.
Yeah, and did you feel how when you were pretty much reaching behind, how I'm actually kind of forcing the rib
Pressing
cage forward?
yeah.
Because there's a tendency to kind of rotate in that direction and just getting the most without that rotation. Let's get that other side.
At home, if I, let's see, trying to figure out how I would block that. I mean, I could put a yoga block or something, but then I'd still hit the wall.
So foam roller is going to be a great idea. Foam roller is going to be super long.
Sure.
And I actually, for myself, this is a big part of my own car. I would actually lean into the foam roller and take a step back on that side, and that would force me into this kind of stiffened position. Anytime I would reach, I would feel that roller really pushing into me.
That's a great
But the
cue.
length of the foam roller is going to give your arm more than enough room.
Okay, that's a great cue. Okay.
Switching sides.
All right.
Nice rolling. We'll get two more on this side. It's looking good.
It feels so much better when you think about rolling deep in the joint. I mean, it's harder, but it feels better. Took me a long while to figure that one out, though.
Excellent. And when doing FRC one-on-one with a person, for me, it's been really useful to kind of give them this vision of that portion between the elbow and the head of the humerus being a rolling pin. And once that motion stops up here, that's when the rolling pin has to roll the dough behind them. And trying to act as if that rolling pin can't move through space without rolling.
Without rotating.
Yeah, so as long as it's rotating, it's rolling along the dough.
Yeah, okay, I like
And
that.
if it's not rolling, it shouldn't be moving
Okay,
in that space.
yeah.
So let's go ahead and do your scapular cars. We'll do it without a wall focus
Okay,
first.
this or?
Let's go ahead and do them with the hands out just a little bit, and you can go a little further in front, right about there.
Okay. Okay.
Good, pause for a moment. So what I'm noticing during that particular articulation is,
My arms are moving in.
well, not only that, but the arms also changed position. So when the arms are a little more into flexion, let's call it midway through your flexion, the arms are telling us the scapula don't want to move unless I'm a little bit lower, right? And this can be a number of different reasons. One of them could be just the recorded pattern. The other one can be, that the axial rotation is still trying to happen and kind of manipulating the position of the arm so that it can still happen in small degrees. And then the other thing is when the scapula is moving through that motion, the arms are just trying to give it the most possible room possible.
Yeah.
Right? The shoulder girdle, I should say.
Yeah.
So one thing we want to do, or we can do, is fixing those arms into position. A lot of times I like to use my mobility sticks, just because they're the handiest tool that I have. But also we can utilize 2 foam rollers to fix those arms into position. Not sure if I'm in your camera view right now or what.
Take a look. Yep.
So I kind of want to be in this Y position, right?
Okay.
Here it's going to give me a more of an abducted position, so it's also good to try it from here. And you can see how the pillars kind of move into a slant when I get it right.
Mm-hmm.
Also, elevation, depression can happen from here. With this particular fixation or fixed position of the arms, I'm gonna get that downward differential. So what I want is when I do elevate, I want both the arms to elevate together in a line as if they're on a shelf,
Okay.
and then drop down into depression. That way they're going together and I'm not getting any humeral motion whatsoever.
Okay.
And then pushing apart, I'll see the pillars tilt. Pulling together, I'll see the pillars come back upright. Elevate, depress, apart, together. So that's one way. And in front, it's giving us a little bit more of an adducted position.
Uh-huh.
The more in front I get, the more I'm going to challenge the scapula to be a little more precise in their motion. So I pretty much want to start in this Y position,
Okay.
and then I can work my way out into that completely crucifix-like position.
I've been practicing the wall
Yeah.
ones, and that's helpful, except that I can't see. I can't see what's happening, so I have to pay so much more attention to feeling it, and it's I'm still sort of processing.
Sometimes also if people oftentimes, because people value their cell phones. So I'll have them close to the ground, especially if there's a carpet. I'm not worried about the cell phone being broken, but I'll have them do one side at a time. I'll put the cell phone right on their elbow pit, and I'll have them go up. And when they go up, if their arm drops or rises, that cell phone will start to slide, and they'll really start paying attention to that, right?
Yeah.
So when we do go into exactly. When we do go into elevation, we don't want to tilt in either direction. We want your arms to generally be sticks attached to your scapula.
Well, is it just then that the scapula aren't really strong enough to hold the weight of my arm?
That could be the tissues being at a disadvantage for that particular lever. It could be part of it.
Yeah.
But even more so, I think it's the fact that sometimes when the scapula rise, they're so used to upwardly rotating instead of just elevating, right?
Yeah.
And the same thing when we go down. When we press downward, we might be bringing ourselves into a little bit of retraction and also dropping the arms to try and get that retraction.
I think that's definitely true. I think I manipulate my arms to try to get more scapular motion. All right, so.
Go for it.
See, I want to lift my elbows. Okay.
Good. So when you elevate, allow the arms to lift off.
Okay.
When you depress, allow them to connect. And then bring it in and push it away.
Okay. So.
Yeah, so when you bring it in, there's also a bit of elevation that happens. So just try and feel them come together as much as they can without elevating. There you go. Yeah, and that's actually a really good drill to practice if you have an elevation tendency.
Yeah, that's so much over using that
and then bring it back down, together, apart.
Ooh, see, they really drop, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this is a good, this is a good cue for me. Oh, okay. Wow. They're like all over the place, huh?
Yeah, takes practice. Yeah, that's the retraction we want right there. That is definitely less elevation. Make sure you're still radiating.
So, irradiating here, would that mean kind of pressing my shins down and kind of pressing my thigh bones down?
Yeah, so with irradiation, any free musculature that can contract can be contracting. But mainly, all of this stuff here, right? Because all this stuff here, as I start to go into any protraction or retraction, a lot of times my spine wants to go into this flexion and extension, and that's what we want to avoid as well.
Okay. Still feel like I confused retraction and elevation.
All right, I'm going to guide you a little bit. So let's go ahead into that elevation again, and let's retract in that elevation, and then protract in that elevation. Good. Now bring the arms down into depression, and retract, and protract. Now elevate. Good. Let the arms come up. Yep. And together, and apart. Then down. Yep. Make that contact. Bring them together. And apart. Yep. So which part is the hardest for you, you feel?
This right shoulder blade just doesn't know where it was.
So specifically in depression?
In all of it, and it wants to go into internal rotation every time. It's really hard to keep that.
Yeah, so another way we can kind of block off, which is putting a little bit more into the mix here. Let's see if this is good enough distance. Elbows bent. I'll bring these rollers in toward you just a little bit. Hopefully they're not too high. Good, that's gonna keep you in an external rotation.
Okay.
And we'll stay depressed for now, just practicing the retraction and protraction in depression. Feels a little bit smaller now.
Yeah. And almost impossible to generate any movement on the right. It's like,
there we go. Hold it, and protract. Good. Try not to flex your spine when you protract. And protract. Good. Retract. And protract. Your scapula, like my fingers attached, they start to respond a lot.
yeah, they can a little cute about where they are.
Retract. And protract. Okay, a little less protraction, because when you do protract, your shoulders are still trying to get there. And retract. And protract. We'll get two more. Good, rest.
Yeah, so it's feels really laggy on the right side. But I mean, I guess that's to be expected, given it's like that for.
Yeah, repetition. Repetition, repeat in the positions.
Yeah, I like this whole setup is.
Yeah, this is pretty much a stiff setup. I mean, and and everyone is pretty specific from one person to the next. I might actually lower or raise this. But again, this is just another way.
Yeah.
And then to kind of figure out, a lot of times I'll say, you know what, in the process of looking at that scapular articulation, which point has the most struggle? Even if it feels like, elevation is struggling too. Let's focus on depression. We'll keep that depression and maybe we'll load that with a very light band, right? To be here, or maybe even here, right?
So like holding a band.
Yeah, I'm holding on to the band and I'm trying to feel the scapula spread and then bringing it back. That could be one way. Another way is actually having those pillars still And we'll get those pillars a little out to the side. And staying depressed, and you'll grab onto these bands. Give yourself just a little slack as you straighten your arms. Two fists punching to opposite walls. Yep. So staying in this position, this is aiding your depression. You can feel how your elbows need to press down onto that.
Yep.
And this is going to be a little less of a internal rotation with protraction because you're facing straight out. Right? So when you're going forward, this really wants to happen. When you're going straight out, it won't happen as much. So it's a really good way to start to train that tendency. Yes, and using the band as your external load, exactly. And this is getting that protraction with the scapula move out completely laterally. And that band is actually helping you come into retraction.
Yeah, I like this. This is a good cue. Good. Oh.
Let's get 5 more reps here. Good, trying your best not to elevate with this one.
Yeah, I can really see that tendency to add the elevation. There it is.
2. 1. Good. That actually looks really good. So this could be one great way to start to aid that retraction tendency and really get a depression focus, right? Because your elbows are in contact, and the forward motion, obviously, the change in orientation of the humerus actually makes you want to do what your body's used to. Whereas here, if your body doesn't really see a reason to internally rotate.
Yeah.
This is a good place to start when it comes to the scapula for sure.
Yeah, I can, just being here feels like a stretch, like all the posterior armpit area is like stretchy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No pain though, yeah?
No
Okay,
pain. Mm-mm. Just really like a stretch.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. That
So next up, we'll go into a little bit of axial training. And I think that with the focus on the shoulder and all the things that the spine is doing revolving around the glenohumeral rhythm motions, I feel like the axial should always follow, or vice versa, precede the actual scapular motion,
Okay.
right? So I would say one day, if I'm doing heavy on the scapula, I would do light on the axials.
Okay.
And then the next day I would do heavy on the axials, light on the scapula. That way we get a little bit of undulation into the complex,
Okay.
but we constantly chip away at the same goal, which is separating the two actions and really getting them strong.
Okay.
So now I'm gonna set you up. We'll make a nice high surface here. And we are really gonna start talking to the spine as well as your axial rotation, because we all know that that rib cage likes to start to pop.
Yeah.
So you got 3, 4, let's get 5 under here.
I did practice the breathing again a couple times on the ball to get the irradiation. I think that drill is helping a little bit of at least bringing a little more awareness to this side of the rib cage that wants to flop forward all the time.
Yeah, it's definitely a really good joint practice.
Yeah.
So let's actually get you into position. I want your hands like so. I'm actually going to place
Okay,
another
let me just-
half roller between your hands.
Make sure I can see all that. Alright.
So as you can see, I've set my elbows up to be glued to the blocks.
Yep.
My hands are actually fixed into a position that promote an external rotation.
Yep.
And right away, well, my sweater's on, so you can't really see me irradiate, but I'm going to exhale and focus my rib cage down toward my hips.
Yep.
So let's do that
Just
first.
staying and breathing.
Staying and breathing first.
Okay. So about here.
Yeah, that looks good. Deep breath in, exhale and bear down to about 30%. Good, feeling the rib cage, try to get closer to the hips here. And this will start off your passive stretch. And just make note, if you feel like your elbows have a hard time staying bent, this drill is probably going to be better off formed against the wall, so that if they do start to unbend, it's almost like an unconscious block there. The wall is going to stop them from unbending. Staying here for about 2 minutes. At some point, if I see some spinal action, I'll place some blocks underneath your rib cage. And just breathing shallow through that tension. No pain in the shoulder in this position, correct?
It's
Funky?
it's moving around because the right side of my rib cage keeps wanting to drop, and so it's like I'm having to unravel it. Keep trying to make space in there. Firmly placed into the ribcage? Yeah.
Awesome. So this is essentially taking away the tendency for the core to feel work to stabilize the position, but it's reinforced stabilization and still allowing you to irradiate against that block. So just try and maintain contact as best you can.
It's it's like it starts pinching, and I feel like it's pinching because this is falling or I'm coming into it. I don't know. It's because I'm in a sort of a.
We can actually lessen the amount of external rotation that's necessary, and we can actually turn this around.
Oh.
Yeah. Does that feel a little bit better? We may have been asking a little too much of it.
Yeah, I think that's better. It's.
Cool.
I just started getting like this, like not knowing where it needs to be to not be feeling strained, and then I think because I'm not sure, I start straining it more.
Yeah, so what I see happening is that it starts to hike a little bit, and the hiking is just it coming away from that tension point. So just try your best to keep the scapula depressed. And that's going to put a little more tension into the lats. The lats are one of the main internal rotators. So the fact that that arm wants to start turning in and hiking up is just a show that the lats are actually really fighting against that tension. So now we're going to start our pails. I'm going to take a deep breath in, exhale, and bear down to about 50%. Good. And I'm going to focus both elbows trying to pressurize the blocks. And I want that pressure to be very light at first. I want it to be about 5 to 10%. Seconds. 4, 3, 2, dial the tension down slowly, immediately engage the opposite direction. Just try to feel those anterior delts trying to rise toward the ceiling. Good. Give me a grip on that half roll right in front. Let your fingertips press into that. Good. Tighter abs. Starting to extend from the spine a bit. Give me a little more flexion like you're trying to crunch. That's going to bring your elbows down. Dial down the tension and just stay in passive stretch. Deep breath in. Exhale and bear down. Good. With that bearing down, give me a crunch sensation. muscles that would actually help lift off. Sustain that tension as best you can. That is excellent. I can feel that engagement bringing a little bit of tremors in, and that's a good thing. And you're doing very well to keep that spinal position, just keeping the elbows in contact. 5, 4, 3, 2, dial it down and stay in passive stretch as best you can. Just breathe. Deep breath in. Exhale and bear it out. Good. Keep that tension at about 50 to 60%. Nice crunching action. Driving down at about 40% of your maximal tension. Five, 4, 3, 2, dial that tension down and immediately engage the opposite direction. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And gently straighten the elbows so you can start to bring that position. Good. So having my hand underneath your elbow is a very telling thing too. And when you're going through,
You probably feel that all that.
well, it gives me a few different sensations. Number one, it tells me if you're actually dialing down the pressure. So when you pressurize my hand, I can feel like, okay, this is a 10-pound weight, right? And then as I ask you to dial down, it should feel like a 10-pound weight becomes 9, becomes 8, becomes 7, becomes 6, becomes 5, becomes 4, until it's feeling like it's trying to lift off. And that's when I get the jittery stuff, which is a good thing, because it tells me that this distance is good. Anytime you lift off, I'm like, okay, that space has to get taken up. And did the lift off actually happen, or was it coming from a spinal extension where the rib cage starts to pop, right? And in the last two, no rib cage pop, right?
Yeah,
It actually held the crunch.
good. Yeah.
Yeah. So anytime that elbow lifts off, and when you're doing these on your own, that's the first thing I would think. Is it coming from here,
Right.
or is it coming from here? Because I'm trying to get more, right? And in that case, I want to accentuate my crunch, feel like I'm right back in position. And if I got this correctly, there's no lift off happening, even though it feels like it's lighter on the blocks.
So that's my way to take up the space, really. Is
Yeah.
To kind of come down deeper so that I'm actually more.
Yep.
extension.
And that compensatory action is going to want to happen. So anytime it does lift off, especially with this much of a physical cueing as far as active blocking, I want to make sure, like, okay, this lift off, I may not have to take up this space. I may just have to crunch further into it because now I've lost a little bit of that.
Okay.
Yeah?
That makes sense.
For your clients, let's say Beth is here and she's, yeah. Well, I mean, it would be a totally different
Yeah.
thing. But with, let's say Beth is here and she's, got pressure into your hand. With Beth, she may not realize that, the tension is still on,
Right.
right? And in that case, you can tell her, right now, I want you to crush my hand. Instead of saying crush the block, I want you to crush my hand with your elbow. And I want you to crush it like you're trying to obliterate it. And she'll give it all she's got. And then to turn that down, I would say now, try to give my hand a little bit of breathing room, right? If my hand was a lung, I want you to allow it to get a little more air. Or if my hand is a scale, the scale is now reading 100 pounds, I want you to try to make that 80 pounds, now 60 pounds, now 40 pounds, now 20 pounds, right?
Okay.
And she'll kind of get the gist, and it takes practice. I mean, she's at a totally different end of the learning process. But yeah, specifically for you, the information of getting that crunch in.
This was really helpful to help keep that position, so I could remove that.
Yeah, and you know, I remember one of the Kinstretch classes that you came to, we had you completely laid out, right? This is another thing that happens when there's 8 people in the class or 20 people in the class. It's like, there's a certain amount of cueing I can give before I can move on, right? But with FRC, I would say, if you're on the floor completely flat, note that your shoulder mobility stops you. If I had a straight stick here, stops you right about here before that happens. So if you're on the floor, it's probably a better idea to elevate your body so that your body can still maintain that crunch position. Your arm will be at a slight angle toward the ground. Or if you're against the wall, and this would be maybe a 5% dig, right? I can actually have the roller here. I'm reaching my chest to the wall, and my point of contact is here, right?
Yeah.
And mind you, these things, oftentimes I'll do both arms at once, but it's absolutely not necessary, and it's actually even more beneficial if we're probably going to do one arm at a time, because then you're going to get more of a focus.
Right.
If I'm doing one arm at a time, this hand can hold on to the block and keep it in position as well as radiate.
Okay.
And then I'm going to get a really good read also. Or I can actually put my fist here and radiate right against the wall and keep my chest here. And that's going to keep me even more in a crunch position. And then as I do my irradiation into the wall, you know, this is going to be conducive to producing about 5 to 30%. And then I can try to lift the arm away without getting that chest lift away from my target here. Right, so just a couple different ways to think about that undulation.
Yeah, I think that the time we did it in class against the wall, I had a lot of the similar kind of problems as I was just, my rib cage falls, you know, it does this thing, and then I start to get the pinch and the numbness and the tingling and stuff, and but that setup where I don't really have anywhere to go, that probably would work.
Yeah, and if you're ever feeling the tingling sensation, a lot of times too, when we set up, I'll go into a really extreme external rotation, right? My elbows are super close, my hands are wide, and this is really making me externally rotate. As I go into that flexion, my arms may not have that, so all of a sudden they're trying to escape, right? My elbows are trying to go wider. Maybe it's about getting the elbows into a wider position, giving them a little bit more wide berth, and getting them into that comfort zone where it feels uncomfortable, but it's not producing that elevation. It's not producing that impingy kind of feeling. And then working our way slowly upwards toward that harder position.
Yeah. I just, it's better. It's like every week I think that this is getting, like, I notice it more, I'm more aware of it and everything, but it's
a lot to work
happening.
with. Yeah, it's a lot to work with, and it's going to take some time.
Yeah.
But the one thing that I like about what I've seen here is we didn't get that ribcage pop.
Yeah,
right?
that was a really good setup for that.
And also that the when I saw you on the ground and there was that lift off, you know, I saw that the slight rotation happens, and I'm thinking in my head like, the rib cage pop is not just a rib cage issue; it's a spinal rotation issue,
Absolutely,
and it's a spinal extension issue.
Yes,
right.
Absolutely.
But little by little, it gets better and better, especially with this particular setup for you. This is going to be golden.
Yeah, I like this. I think I mentioned before that a big part of noticing all of this has become that I've been getting a lot of overload symptoms in my left foot, and it's like I just am all the time here or here, or it's like what, you know, like it's rotation, it's extension, and so it's more notable. My brain is taking more note of it, but man, it's like, yes,
it can be really discouraging.
Really frustrating, you know. It's like, how come I don't want to be that old lady who's like this, you know, like.
And you won't, because you have the tools now. And you have the awareness.
Yeah. Right? But it's like.
And the awareness just becomes even stronger.
That's the biggest thing I think I'm noticing, which is such a positive, is that I am noticing it more and more and more, but it's still like noticing it because I'm waking up in pain. So.
Yeah, well, pain is a good reminder.
Right.
To keep on it.
Yeah.
For me personally, anytime I'm in pain, I'm like, okay, I don't care how far I have to drive today. I'm gonna stop at Chimacoon Farm Stand and I'm gonna do some pails and rails right in the parking lot.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah, I look like a crazy person, but at the same time, my SI joint is not gonna feel as impacted after driving for 3 hours.
Oh, you get SI joint stuff too?
I mean, ever since I moved out here, in New York, you have these pedometers on your phone. On a regular basis, my average was about 25,000 steps a day.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and it's partial because I didn't own a car, and if I was going to take the subway, I had to walk 1.5 miles to the subway.
Yeah.
And then in the city, I refused to take the train uptown and downtown. So oftentimes I would schedule clients about an hour apart so I can walk from tip to tip.
Yeah.
But out here, it's like if I'm walking, I have a 4-year-old. It takes about an hour and a half to walk about 1.5 miles.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So I have to drive.
Yeah.
And yes, my SI joint is not happy with all the driving, so I
Yeah.
have to do extra for everything.
Yeah. I had a lot of driving in May at one point, 2 days of a long drive, a day of sitting, and then the drive back home, and I'm already like, okay, I'm just gonna have to plan like a lot of stops to break it up.
Extension pails and rails are going to be necessary, which is what I was going to get into today.
Okay.
Yeah, so with the extension, I always like to focus on axials first.
Yeah.
So with extension, it's kind of tricky in the sense of where my hips are, and again, that feeling of where you are in space gets sharper and sharper. But with my personal extension, I tend to externally rotate when I extend. So I will always set myself up in an extended position. I'll usually bend my knee because the easier thing for me to do is always straight. My quads overpower everything.
Yeah.
And I'll place something up against the wall so that every time I try to externally rotate, I get that feeling, right?
Okay, so like I have a Swedish ladder, I could sort of place myself so that I would hit the ladder.
Yeah, for me it's my dresser at
Okay.
home. So I actually have a dresser that's the perfect length, and I just prop myself up so where my foot is or the dresser's on the inside of my foot.
Okay.
For today, well, go ahead and use this. Hopefully this works out. Let's see if I can do this. I'm gonna park myself super duper close. And that works.
Okay.
So right away, the first focus is going to be an axial pails and rails, right?
Yep.
If I want to get a stretch position, I'm probably going to have to get my knee a little bit closer, which is what I'll do now. And then fix myself into that extended position. Now the next thing that happens for me is I start to extend at the spine. So I'm going to go ahead and exhale to the point where I feel like I'm crunching. And I'm going to move my kickstands out accordingly to keep that crunch position. And right now I can feel my hamstring saying, we're probably going to end up cramping, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Right? And this is a very mild feeling of internal rotation for me as far as stretch positioning.
Okay.
If I was having someone's hands doing an FR, I would probably take myself a lot further into internal rotation here.
Okay.
But this feels good for about 5 to 10%. And I'm going to stay in position for about 2 minutes. My hamstrings won't like it. And then once that 2 minutes is up, I'm actually going to start my pails by driving the inside or the medial malleolus toward the mirror.
Yep.
And then away from the mirror. And again, if I lose this foam roller, which I think right now
Yeah, you could.
I can,
Right.
then I would actually scooch my knee just a little bit closer so that when I do that
You don't-
external
yeah, you
rotation
don't
or
lose
internal
it.
rotation, it won't lose it.
Okay, that makes sense.
Give it a shot. I'll set you up.
All right. Well, I think you guys should move to Port Angeles because the walking is way better there.
My wife and I were just saying that Port Angeles has grown on us significantly. Every time we go over there, it's like, It was actually nice. It's really nice over here.
I like it so much better than Swim. We were down here for 4 years and we've been up there for like a year and a half. It's so much better.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's awesome.
Walking is just way better. So like
Yep,
that.
so you're gonna scoot yourself all the way back. This knee can stay exactly where it is.
Yeah. Good. So right now we've got a little bit of a hip differential here. I want you, no, down. Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Oh,
Right there.
There's a nice stretch.
Yep. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna move this a little bit more toward your midline so that when we place this here.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it.
So I will always start with the axials and then immediately go into extension, tails and rails. But let's start with the axial first.
Yeah, that's something.
Exhaling. Keep the tension at the belly. And you can move your hands forward if you want to, just to keep that flexion at the spine. Good, I can see the glute really working to keep that extension. I can see the hamstrings engaging to keep that flexion. Just breathing. So there's a lot of biases going on here. There's a hip extension bias, there's this internal rotation bias, there's a knee flexion bias, which oftentimes you'll know if your hamstrings are ready for this or not within the first minute or so.
It feels tenuous.
One more minute here. Good, don't lose the knee flexion. So this is not just training our hip flexors to, allow hip flexion, hip extension to happen, but it's also training our hamstrings to be strong in this extended position.
I can feel the medial hamstring, which is the one that I tore, and it's very weak, and it's not liking this very much, but that's okay.
This is definitely a good start position for it. 30 seconds here. Fifteen seconds. Four, three, two, deep breath in, exhale, bear down to about 40%. And let the knee stay glued to the ground, but you're trying to press the medial malleolus toward the whip or toward the class. Note that if you hear any cracking whatsoever, stop pressing. I'm not sure what kind of surface is behind this mirror. 5, 4, 3, 2, dial that tension down and immediately engage the opposite direction. Lateral malleolus is trying to reach away from the mirror. Dial that tension down, just breathing in position. So we know that from a hip flex position, your internal rotation looks really, really good. Obviously, the strength is something that I definitely wanted to work on. But in this hip extended position, it doesn't look as good as the hip flexed position. So this could be another way to work on your internal rotation as well.
Okay. What I am noticing is that these deficits that I have here in strength, trying to keep my ribcage up, are where they're more or less where they should be, or they're more where they should be, and I'm feeling a lot of effort there to maintain that, so that's nice.
Deep breath in. Exhale and bear down. I'm going to move this back just a little bit so it's in a better position, it won't fall out. And start to bring pressure into that medial malleolus.
not gonna go for a third round like I usually would. We're gonna go right into our extension pails and rails. So on your next bear down, you're actually trying to keep all this stuff from rising as we press the knee into the ground. It's almost like we're trying to push the ground down with our knee.
Okay.
And bear down. Good. So really trying to see no rise here. Good. That's what I want to see right there. Five, four, three, two. Keep in position, going in the opposite direction. Trying to feel more extension. Nice, engaging that glute to get that extension happening. Five, four, three, two. Dial down the tension. Relax into position. If you feel like you can go further into extension, utilizing gravity, you can.
And is it okay to be on my forearm?
Absolutely can. Yep. So in this position, I just want you to make sure if you're ever doing this on your own, sometimes you'll get a little bit of a hip hike where the left hip starts to rise. Yes, that's a good fix right there.
Okay.
Just breathe for now.
Yeah, so the reason I have to take off early is that I randomly met this woman at the Port Angeles Farmers Market who is the new executive director of Olympic Peninsula Healthy Communities Coalition, and they're having a lunch at the saltwater pool.
Sweet.
Pool there. So yeah, I'm like, well, that's cool.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Networking opportunity.
Yeah.
Deep breath in. Exhale, bear down. Good. Let that tension radiate into the thigh, bringing the knee, pressurizing the floor. Three, two, one. Dial the tension down. Immediately engage the opposite direction, trying to extend more, utilizing that glute. Yes. Five, four, three, two, one. Dial that tension down and stay in position breathing. We'll get one more set of pails and rails here. I love how you just went further into extension. Anytime you feel that's possible, you go with it.
Oh, my butt is cramping like crazy. But that's okay. Yep. Eat it for lunch.
Deep breath in. Exhale, bear down. Good. This time you're going to bear down to your greatest, safest effort. That's probably going to help with any cramping that's going on. And we're going to allow that tension to radiate into the quad, down into the knee, pressurizing the ground. Greatest, safest effort. Five, four, three, two. Dial that tension down. Immediately engage the opposite direction. Beautiful. Five, four, three, two, one. Dial the tension down. Allow the knee to straighten and slowly break position. That was really, really good.
Okay.
So doing these, all right, so I just focused on hip extension,
Yeah.
right? But we really focused on an internal rotation bias, right? Creating these biases actually helps with that focal point a lot more than just doing the focal point. So always thinking of axials first to help that position, and then going right into the actual focal point is going to be a great idea. Can we do this with a straight leg? Absolutely. But the fact that you had an issue with your hamstring being torn just means that that hamstring can benefit from having this bias. And let's say today you did pails and rails, right? The next day you could probably do this position, only focusing more on the hamstring itself.
Okay.
So let's say I have, this position of trying to be fully extended. I go into my hamstring flexion. I'm now going to do a tibial, right? And I can do that unloaded and then loaded, right?
So like with a band or something?
A band, an ankle weight.
Ankle weight.
And the idea is if I'm feeling, or let's say I'm doing this for the first time, I can take a look at myself in the mirror for the first time just to see where my body is going and what I should be feeling. And then I want to try to nail the feeling and remember it, and then I don't have to look at it. But what's going to happen is as I go into my tibial pails and rails, I'm going to want to start coming out of that hip extension.
Right, using something else to...
Yep, so even though we're focusing on the hamstrings, if we're in this extended position, the most important thing is the extended position, right? So
Okay,
you always
yeah.
want to remember, the moment that I start coming out of that, I really want to focus on going into that, right? And that way, my hamstring is now going to be performing better in an extended position, as well as the extended position benefiting during this hamstring motion.
Yeah,
Right.
okay, that makes sense.
One thing I like to do for myself is I actually will put a block because I know that I start to come away from it.
So that you have
So
a
I
tactile
feel it.
cue,
Yeah, I keep feeling that block right against the front of my quad. And
If you come
anytime
away,
I come
you know.
away, I stop, I reach the contact point again, and then I try to go a little bit slower into it so that I know, I'm really keeping true to the position.
Okay.
And that way hip extension is going to be benefited, as well as the strength through the motion in that hip extension.
Yeah, I mean, actually, this position, as awkward as it kind of was I could feel like all of this stuff stretching a lot too,
Yeah.
and feeling like I was inflating it more than there's something about the tension of the position was firing a lot of this stuff as well as that deep hip stuff that's not really online because everything's kind of come forward.
Yeah, and your hands being fixed in that position too is a big deal, because this is training for a lot of different parts, right? Like we're focusing on hip extension, we're focusing on this internal rotation bias and trying to go ahead and like stretch all of those axial rotators, right? We're trying to teach them to engage and disengage, and then we're trying to teach the hip to stay in this extended position, but we're also teaching the radiation. There's so much going on.
Yeah.
But in this position, now your spine, or rather your brain, is learning that your spine does not have to go into extension in order to focus on whatever else is going on.
Right.
So this is also training your brain to control your spine,
Yeah.
as well as to control the tension that's going on in the torso and
Yeah.
the rest of the body. So there's a lot going on.
Yeah, it's an awkward position, a little bit awkward setup, but kind of worth it.
Yeah, and always parking yourself into a position against the wall, or for me, against the dresser if you have a dresser, something that's
Yeah.
not going to move.
Mhm.
That constant is actually going to be a good form of policing,
Yeah.
right? So always trying to give yourself those borders.
Yeah, I think I've discovered the more I can block myself, the more success I can have, because there's too many moving parts on this right side if I don't keep them bolstered, blocked, whatever.
Yeah, and it's an excellent phase one. Like for any beginner, I'm probably going to have them blocked off to the max. And then, the next day, when we do our cars, maybe not being blocked off, but there's probably going to be a 3-to-1 ratio of that, to start,
Yeah,
so that the blocking kind of reinforces everything neurologically.
yeah, that was a super helpful position actually. I can feel this is still kind of like talking a little bit. But,
With that, we should go into some T-spine cars.
okay, all right, and then I got roll.
Yep.
Okay, so I have been practicing these
Awesome.
at least once during, in my daily cars, and then one more time later in the day. I don't know that they really look a lot better, but.
How do they feel to you?
They feel better on this side where it used to be that every time I go through here, I get that feeling like my ribs are crossing and like in a very icky way.
Mhm.
And like this morning I was noticing, I can move through that without that feeling if I'm slow and careful.
Yeah, slow and careful is the way.
I
That's
can't
right.
say I can necessarily reproduce that right now, but we'll see. So,
Nobody's perfect, but better is better.
It's such a work in progress.
One more.
I have to think about it so hard.
Good. Take a break. I'm going to move you through the next one. So, a couple different things. Whenever we're going through this thing, through this motion, it's always beneficial too to note that whenever I'm closing an angle, I more than likely will feel tension here. But I should also focus on feeling space occur here. So anytime I'm side bending, yeah, I want to feel all this stuff crunch up, but I also want to feel all of this getting long. And if I do take the moment to actually focus on tension here, long here, then I start to get more.
Yeah.
Yeah? So while I'm moving you, I'm going to say tension, 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 long, 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 and then we'll start to move.
Okay.
Okay?
All right.
So let's go into this flexed position first. Good. All the tensions at the front of the belly, all rectus abdominis. Feel all of this trying to get as long as it possibly can. Feel all of this trying to reach toward me. Hold that position. All of this trying to reach toward me as well. Good. Think of your rib cage trying to touch your hips. Good. That's a big flexion. Keep that flexion. I'm going to rotate you. Good. Once we feel like we've got no more, all the tension is here. All the long space is here. Good. Tension, 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 tension. Nice and long pause. Feel how long. That's a big side bend compared to the one you just showed me. Keep that. Don't lose the tension here. Start to bring this away from my fingertips toward the front. Yep, away from my fingertips toward the front. Feel your chest reach toward the ceiling. Good. Pause. All of this gets as much tension as it possibly can. Chest keeps reaching for the ceiling. Good. Tension here. Long here. Don't rotate yet. Tension here. Long here. Yes, that's a big side bend. Pause. Feel that length. Feel all this tension. Keep generating tension, almost like to the point where you're going to cramp. Good. Pause. Bring this rib cage toward your left hip. Good. Nice tension here. Feel all this length. Don't move just yet. Feel all of this get really long. Tension, tension, tension. Good. Drop this rib cage down to levels with the other. And center that rotation. Hold. Good. All of this comes toward me. Yep. All of this comes toward me. Good. Rotate to the left. Good. All of this is getting very long. Tension, tension, tension. Beautiful. Excellent. Keep that tension here. Start bringing this away from me. Good. Your chest keeps reaching away from my fingertips back here. Good. Center that extension. Excellent. Tension here. Don't rotate yet. Full side bend. Long, long, long on this side. Beautiful side bend there. Left rib cage comes toward the right hip. That's rotation. Nice space here toward me. Good. Big flexion. Rotate to the center. Excellent.
Oh, that's
Rest.
so much bigger than.
Yes.
I think I keep thinking it's smaller than it is, but that's a lot
Yep.
bigger than.
Yeah, when you feel my hands and I say, get this toward me,
Yeah,
all of a
the
sudden this
tactile
starts to
cues
reach,
are-
get this toward me, right? So when you're doing your cars and it's a slow and steady thing, think, I'm gonna do 3 repetitions, try to max this shit out.
Okay.
And imagine my hands.
Well,
Right.
and that was really helpful because I think I've been really unclear about how much whole spinal flexion as opposed to just T-spine flexion that there was. So that's very helpful to feel like, okay, it's really full spinal flexion.
Yeah,
Okay.
everything gets into it.
Okay, that was helpful because I think, yeah, again, I've been sort of thinking, well, it's really just up here that I'm moving, and how do I isolate that without bringing this into it? So
Yeah.
things get clearer.
Yeah, little by little, it gets better and better and better. But you can feel how that positioning too, with that amount of focus, I kept doing this more and more and more, and you kept giving me more. This is 100% practice.
Yeah.
Right? So
And
keeping
I
it
didn't
to
get
about 3 reps.
Any of that. I didn't get any of that weird, funky feeling like these are getting crossed, which it just does not feel
With an
very
external load too, I mean, my fingertips being the external load, that focal point kind of creates these borderlines, you know,
Yeah.
and the ribs, or rather the tissues that control that rib positioning, don't really get as confused,
good. Yeah.
right?
Yeah, that was helpful. That felt really good actually.
Good stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, that's way more than my brain had on tap for what was.
And it's just gonna get sharper,
Yeah,
sharper and sharper.
that was.
But practice the hip extended position,
Yeah.
and you know, practice the axials at the shoulder, of course. And if at any time you're feeling that jump, dial it down, get a little bit wider. Make sure that the internal rotation happens just a little bit more, and that's going to tell your lats, relax, right? Because with this wide hand, close elbow position, we are really externally rotating,
Yeah.
and chances are that, you know, your shoulder is just not liking that degree of external rotation in this degree of flexion.
Yeah.
So give it a little less, right? Now we're a little more internally rotated, maybe holding onto a ball at the center instead of the
Okay.
front molar. And that's gonna make it just a little bit easier for the lats to allow that flexed position.
Yeah. Yeah, this whole right side feels, you know, just a little,
It's gonna take some work.
yeah, it's just the math is really off on that side.